374.
On page 15, beginning on line 1, strike all of section 6 and insert the following.
Last line.
Section 6 and insert providing a contingent effective date.
Senator Patton.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Move adoption of Amendment 0374.
Senator Patton moves adoption of Amendment number 0374. Remarks, Senator Patton.
Thank you, Mr. President. Since the United States Supreme Court issued their ruling in the Bruin case, there are a number of pieces of legislation and that have been enacted that are under court scrutiny. And because in that case, the Supreme Court directed that what needed to be looked at to make a determination as to the constitutionality as to what the historical tradition of firearm regulation was at the time of the founding of our country. And I point that out because what this amendment does, it removes the emergency clause from the bill, preventing it from taking effect immediately, and it adds a subsection that it provides the bill takes effect when the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals interprets and applies those historical traditions. And this is especially important, Mr. President, as the case of Miller v. Bonta, which I've spoken of before on the floor, works its way to a decision. And that's out of the Southern District of California, Judge Roger Benitez. And Mr. President, he ruled that the California so-called assault weapons ban enacted back in 1989 was unconstitutional. Then that went up to a three-judge panel, and they stayed the ruling while it was being litigated, and that went on for a brief while. And then when the Bruin case came down, the court then didn't allow the litigation to continue, but remanded it back to Judge Benitez. And he is expected to issue a ruling very shortly. So that is kind of the legal background. And of course, Mr. President, as you well know, from your days back in D.C. and probably dealt with some of these issues of the Ninth Circuit, we are in the Ninth Circuit here in our state. And so those rulings are very important. And while that may well be appealed to a ruling of the entire Ninth Circuit, that will be controlling. So why spend all the money, all the litigation costs, all that on a challenge to this law, which certainly will come, I'm quite convinced, very quickly, if indeed it is passed and signed by the governor. So I think this is a taxpayer-friendly amendment and one that makes reasonable sense given the direction that the courts seem to be going, and especially given the decision by our U.S. Supreme Court in the Bruin case. Thank you, Mr. President.
Further remarks, Senator Dhingra.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm rising in opposition to this amendment. We have seen this amendment before, and we've heard the arguments on this amendment before as well. And I wish I could just say go to TVW and go hear that. But I will say what the judicial system does is uncertain. They don't have timings on when they issue opinions. We actually don't know how broad or narrow those opinions are. We don't know what facts they're going to take into account in order to make those decisions. That's what keeps all of us lawyers in business. And so I'm going to ask for a no vote because we do not need to abdicate our legislative responsibilities to the uncertainties of the judicial system. Thank you.
Further remarks, Senator Patton.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm not asking us to go down to the local bar and grill and throw darts and see where they land. I am basing this more on the decision that our United States Supreme Court has made. And I guess would also say I somewhat, agree with you on the judicial part, but it ought to also be applied legislatively then, and we already have statutes that say we'll do whatever California does. So I think it goes both ways. Urging support for the amendment. Thank you.
There are no further remarks. Question before the Senate is adoption of amendment number 0374. As many are in favor will signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The noes appear to have it. Noes have it. The amendment is not adopted.